Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening as we welcome our listeners, our viewers this evening, Wednesday nights, with myself, Inayat Wadi, and great to be in your company once again, uh, wherever you are listening to us on whatever platform of Salam Media this evening. Now, we have entered into the month of August, and we know August traditionally in South Africa is referred to as Women's Month. And over and over again, we hear certain buzzwords talking about the challenges that women are faced with, and we hear about gender equality, an urgent need that needs to be addressed as a matter of priority. We hear of feminization of poverty, feminization and impact of things like HIV and AIDS to women, violence against women, and also recently we've heard about xenophobic attacks on women. Now, these are just some of the crises and some of the significant challenges that South African women face, and there are many more. There are problems with regard to leadership challenges as well. And all of this we address, and over again, we've seen it in the last few years that every time the month of August comes, every time we talk about Women's Month, we talk about Women's Day, which is going to be taking place next week on Tuesday. These are issues that we continue discussing. The question is, how much progress have we made as far as addressing these issues and these challenges go? And also looking at women in the workplace. And this is a global phenomenon, and some of it is not only unique to South Africa, where we see women right across the entire world faced with multitudes of challenges in more ways than one. And tonight we will be focusing on South Africa, but just to look at some of the other global issues, when one looks at the refugee problem, for instance, and when one looks at all the conflict zones right across the entire world, we know the world is focused on Ukraine at this point in time, but there have been many right across the entire world. We're looking at the Middle East, looking at some of the countries in Asia. And when one looks at the refugee problem, where you've got millions and millions of refugees, those that are displaced internally, externally, and women are basically left to carry the burden. Now, this is the problem that we are faced with, and this is the reason why tonight on Salam Media, on Wednesday nights, with myself, Inayat Wadi, we've assembled a panel to discuss this very issue. And we are talking with women who have made a huge impact. They've made a mark as well, both in business and also looking at the type of work they do with regard to empowerment of women. We've got Shereen Hunter, who is the CEO of the Hunter Group brand and PR strategist, Philanthropist. We've got Poppy Kabini, owner at the Khethu Home and Decor, and also founder of She Cares Foundation. Shortly, we will be joined by Quraysha Sooliman, project manager at the Center for Mediation in Africa at the University of Pretoria. And I see the panelists have appeared on screen. Firstly, Shereen, to you, we appreciate you taking time out, and welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Aniyet. I'm so looking forward to the conversation this evening. Thank you for hosting me.
Yes, and also to Poppy Kabini, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yes, now I know both of you and Quraysha will be joining us are highly successful women. And, I've had a look at both your profiles, both Shereen and Poppy. Now, just to start off with you, Poppy, and, I read quite an interesting line that basically describes you from the boardroom to the boxing ring. Now, I know you are competitive and very, very competitive from what I've seen, but at the same time, looking at yourself as a businesswoman, but also close to your heart, the whole question of women empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Being a woman and being in a very tough industry, because I'm in the furniture and manufacturing industry.
Oh, sorry, sorry, Poppy. In fact, when I spoke about the boxing ring, competitive was meant for Shereen, but no problem. You can continue, introduce yourself, just talk to us, but it's fine.
Okay, fine. I'm in a very competitive industry, which is the furniture and manufacturing industry, which is widely known to be a male-dominated industry. So I can say that being a part of that has come with a lot of challenges. Because when you tell people that I'm in the manufacturing space and you're a woman, you find that a lot of people don't even believe that you are in the space, or feel like you're not even supposed to be there. You're supposed to be the administration of that business, not the owner, or even the brains behind the manufacturing part of the entire process. So yeah, I can say that I'm also in the boxing ring, like Shereen.
Yeah. Yes, that's fine. Interesting that you mentioned in a male dominated space. And
Yeah.
Shereen, I suppose, with you in an exactly the same situation, and just looking at yourself, and obviously you've attained huge success as the CEO of the Hunter Group of companies as well. But just take us through this journey, your journey as a woman, particularly when we are talking about in a world that has not, for a very, very long time, I would say, created the type of opportunities that you've taken.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been very exciting. And I also want to say it's been quite difficult. The more I talk about the industries that I work in, and I heard Poppy mention it now when she said, male dominated. Actually, if you think about it, every industry that we come out of historically would have been male dominated. But I think in every generation, you have women who are trailblazers, who are prepared to put a toe in the water and dare to go into a space that women haven't been in before. And I think it is also heavily dependent on the support of good men in those industries to welcome us and to teach us. Because in many industries around the world, women are relatively new. You made a comment, and I used it recently in a media campaign, from the boardroom to the boxing ring, because I come out of corporate South Africa, but play a role as a professional boxing promoter in the sport of boxing. And I love it when people raise their eyebrows and they're surprised to see me in a space that you wouldn't expect to see a woman, a lady, a businesswoman. But it's exciting for me because I think the business of sports is something that all women should have access to. And in sports that are historically male dominated, there are still space for us as women. Some women like to compete, obviously, in the sport, in the ring, on the field, on the court, whatever it is. But outside of the space where women actually compete in sport, there's a lot of administrative, marketing, financial positions that are available. And that's the space that I've been able to secure for myself in the sport of boxing. But it certainly hasn't been easy. And it's still not easy. I lean close to 50 years old now, so I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit tougher, stronger, weathered a few storms, but it's still not easy. We push on forward.
Well, certainly, but obviously your success has, I mean, you've been tenacious, you've been brave, you've shown a lot of courage, and this is the reason why you find yourself where you are today. And I would say exactly the same thing for you, Poppy, as well. But let's come now. Let's talk about South Africa, and we know August is Women's Month. Next week, on the 9th of August, we are celebrating Women's Day, and every year, without fail, Poppy, we notice that the same issues keep on cropping up. When we speak about gender violence, we speak about poverty, we speak about all the priority items, looking at women, and also at the same time, the talk of empowerment of women. Now, I know, through your foundation, this is something that is very, very close to your heart, Poppy. And, just looking at women in general, and if I would ask you to basically just provide me with some sort of an overview on how you see women and challenges generally faced in the country.
So firstly, one thing that I would like to point out, that I would say that I'm a bit unhappy with, when it comes to women empowerment in South Africa, is that we only, in a way, get recognized mostly during the month of August, during Women's Month, and when that month just passes by, it's like we are not there anymore. We always get all this media attention, mostly when it's Women's Month. And I would love to see that happening beyond the month of August, being recognized and always being pushed and, by media or whatever, even beyond the month of August, and not just, getting the recognition during this month, because we are more than just Women's Month. We run businesses that have to run 365 days in a year, and not only in just this month. So, one thing that I've realized is that women find it very challenging, mostly getting into business, because we come from backgrounds that, we don't come from families or schools or wherever where we were taught much about business. And business is not something that you just wake up one day and you're all of a sudden a businesswoman or a businessman, just to pass it on. So we find it hard to learn to be business women, and we are not given that chance to learn business and to understand what business entails, because it takes a lot to be a business person. It takes a lot for one to understand what business means and to run a successful business, more especially being a woman or coming from a family that also was in this industry that is male dominated, and you're this female just coming into this industry, and you're not receiving any support, and you're not receiving, even from our government, most of the time you're not receiving the support that you need to be this businesswoman, because you are seen as very fragile or emotional or whatever, and people don't really see the potential in you. So I'm praying and hoping that people will see a different light from us, that yes, we are emotional beings, yes, we are fragile if we may, but then we are also strong, and we are capable of running businesses that can go beyond just being a small business. We can run million businesses if we have to. And it's something that I wish the world would see, from looking at us as women and not seeing us just during this month, and hoping that we get seen beyond Women's Month.
Well, certainly, and I think you make some very valid points here, Poppy, because we can't have a soda water effect, where we focus just on 1 month or one day in a year. And I'm sure, Shereen, you will agree with me. And I just want to go back. In fact, I read quite an interesting study, and this was in 2019, where it spoke about women struggling, particularly with people in higher positions, having little or no confidence, being able to address certain issues. But there is no doubt, and according to the study, there is no doubt that women want to take the lead. However, there are some very real barriers that are hindering their success, Shereen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge we sit with as women is that, by and large, in many industries, the networks are very, very established, and they've been built up over time. They are strong networks. So to come into a space where there's already an established network of men, they're working well together, everything seems to be perfect, and then they have to make room for you as a woman, and possibly the way that you see things are different, the way that you approach it is different. I think it's a huge adjustment for both men and women. For women who find themselves often the only woman who's at the table when you are invited to join, or maybe just two people in a room full of 20 or 30. I think that's a huge adjustment for a woman, to be able to adapt and find your place and stand in your light, and not make excuses around the way that you approach women. But I also think it can be quite difficult for men as well to get used to a different way, and men can be quite frank sometimes and very to the point. And I think sometimes when women are in the room, they find themselves having to reframe their words or put things across in a certain way. So if I have to be honest, I think, it affects both genders equally. But it's certainly not easy. It takes a long time. It's a lot of work to build the trust. You hear it said all the time, and it is very true. Women have to work twice as hard, and you have to prove that you can do the job. It's not just assumed, that you can do it. But I suppose once you do that, then kind of is the lock that the key that undoes the lock, and the doors do open. But quite slowly, if you think that we're in the year 2022, and in many cases, women are still struggling just to prove themselves or be given the opportunity to do so.
Yes, and Poppy, just your comment on what Shereen has just said in terms of women having to prove themselves more than their male counterparts. Your experience?
Well, with me, being in the industry that I'm in, being the owner of the business that I'm running, I'd have maybe an assistant, male assistant, to come and assist me. They always doubt my capabilities, in being able to design or being able to hold a power tool, and I find it really disturbing, because it's if you can do it, I can also do it, and I think it was yesterday I went to a hardware store to purchase various power tools. And a male came to me and asked me, "What are you going to be doing with these power tools?" No, I'm in the manufacturing space. I run a manufacturing business. Like, do you do the things yourself? Like, yes, I do them myself. And they were very stunned that a woman can actually do that. Like, it's not a train smash. I learned from my grandfather, my late grandfather, and my uncles, and it's something that I've been pursuing, ever since. So for me, thinking that when a man looks at me, they feel like I cannot do what they can do, and it feels like I have to prove myself twice as hard to show that, what, yes, I can also do what you are also able to do. So yes, I feel like women have to work twice as hard to prove themselves, whether it's in corporate or in manufacturing or anywhere else. I feel like we always have to put in twice the work, as men do, just so that people can start taking us seriously.
Yes, and just talking about taking you seriously, and Shereen, I'd like your comment on this, because often we see clear examples of this where women need to prove themselves in more ways than one. They need to prove themselves to be more competent than others. Sometimes their judgment is questioned as far as the expertise go. And we find it often, even in a boardroom scenario, in a corporate scenario, being interrupted when they're trying to put their view across, and those type of things. And at the same time, there is this perception about women being bossy and aggressive.
you know, I'm just laughing because I think, as a woman, you do need to be assertive, because if you're going to be meek and mild and talk softly, already you're up against the perception that you don't know what you're doing, and then you're not taken seriously. And I'll give you an example of that. I recently got a contract in business. And, there's obviously a lot of people that said, "Well done, you've done a great job." Mostly other women, I must say. And then there was a gentleman who said, "Well, you know what, she must have got the job because of who she knows. She's got connections." And went so far as to actually write this on a social media page that was industry specific. So, I just thought to myself, there we go again, rather than just saying, what, job well done, you've been in your industry 25 years, you've been given an opportunity. It would be much easier for your male competitor to say, well, she only got the job because of who she knows, which was absolute nonsense, because that's not why I got the contract. I got the contract because I was able to do the job and able to deliver in excellence. But, sometimes men can be real bullies in that space. And if they don't needle you personally by insulting you or very subtly putting you down in public, then they go to the next level and they start broadcasting nasty comments on social media. And I mean, I've had to face it all in my space. In the last 2 years, I've had gentlemen, I don't know if you want to call them gentlemen, I want to say males writing things about my appearance, about my weight, about my height, about my marital status because I'm a widow. Some men felt that when my husband passed away, I should have quit certain industries or quit certain jobs. It's shocking. It's shocking. It's shocking. Not just that they think it, but that they will say it. And even worse, that they will actually publish it on social media. And this kind of bullying is the kind of bullying that women avoid. And so rather than face that kind of public criticism, they would rather not even try to do the job or rather quit the job. And I think that's terrible. I think, because to survive in certain industries as a woman, you have to be pretty thick-skinned to be able to put up with that level of insults and that level of criticism, which is really completely unwarranted. So when we talk about gender bias, it's a very, very real thing. And fortunately, I can stomach it, and I care less what people think about how tall I am and what I weigh. I really don't care. At the end of the day, it is about how capable I am of doing the job. And I put, shoulders back, chin up, and keep going. But a lot of women can't face that kind of resistance. And then, unfortunately, a lot of talented women get washed out of the system by this kind of public bullying or private bullying, because not all of it is on social media. Sometimes it's comments that are made during meetings. Sometimes it's, little lines that are left in emails, but all pointing to the same thing. Listen, lady, this is not your space. You don't belong here. And in a very subtle or sometimes very direct way, they just basically tell you to get out of that space.
Yes, and Poppy, I think from what Shereen has just spoke about, and also the whole question of about being judgmental, and I read a very interesting comment on your foundation's Facebook page, where it says we need more women willing to say, I've been there and I'm here. You can always talk to me without judgment. Now, this saying is absolutely important, it's very, very critical. And you would find that, generally, we find that, I'm not too sure whether it's a male problem or it's a societal problem, but often we are there, we judge without substance, without having any basis for judging that person. And particularly when it comes to women, I think you are more prone to being judged than males, for instance.
Yeah, well, what Shereen said, about being a widow. Well, I'm divorced, and I actually get it, not only from men, but also from women. Being in this space, being a single parent and being a divorced, people kind of like look down on you. To say that you are more focused on your work and not, building a family or whatever. You're not married, you're not this, you're a single parent. So we do get such judgments from people, even though sometimes they don't just come in words, but then also in actions. Just because you are divorced, you're a single parent, and you are in this industry, people tend to, kind of like judge you, and thinking that you are not married because you are too focused on your work. And that is not the case. As a person or as a woman, you also have to set a mark for yourself and also to be an example to your kids, to say that you can do whatever it is that you want to do, either them being a boys or girls. And for me, it's me setting an example for my boy, and inshallah, other kids that I might have in future, that um, work with what God has given you. If God has given you an opportunity for you to be a business person and to work on something, do that. Don't feel small just because of there's a certain aspect of your life that you haven't achieved yet, or something that you feel like you failed at, or something that God didn't give you, and all of a sudden you want to feel sorry for yourself and feel like you do not match up to other people's standards, whether them being male or female. With what God has given you, just work on that. And for me to be in this industry, I feel like it's God given, and it's something that I have been meant to pursue. And if, inshallah, God has planned for me to get married, I will get married, remarried sometimes, sometime, and have more kids. But then now I'm facing a lot of judgment that I'm in this industry, and I'm divorced, I'm a single parent. People feel like I need to be more focused on being a mother or a stay-at-home wife or whatever. And for me, it's this is what God has given me, this is a talent that I've received from God, and this is what I'm going to pursue in the meantime, and working on myself until I find what it is that God has put in place for me in the future, inshallah.
Yes, I will be coming to the subject of motherhood, because I think that's another a very interesting dynamic to what we are going to be discussing. But Poppy, just coming to the issue of empowerment. Now, I know close to your heart is the subject of women and empowerment. And when we're talking about the type of gender bias that women generally face, how does it impact on them being empowered, or the feeling of being empowered?
Well, when you get to women, and you talk to them about, owning, their own power, for them it feels something that is foreign, because for some reason they feel like they have to be apologetic for being in power. They have to be apologetic for owning their own power. So, when I talk to women about self-empowerment, more especially because I specialize mostly in business and helping other women start their businesses, because I've been in business for so many years. I've had other businesses that failed, but then, I came back because I felt that, this is who I am and this is what I want to do. And, sitting down to women and talking to them, and telling them that, you are powerful and you can do this. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have excuses for it, or feel apologetic, or feel sorry for yourself, or, when you meet other people, you want to apologize for the power that you have. So empowering women, for me, has become, I would say, a calling, and, helping them to realize who they are and what they are capable of. Because, looking at our economy, is very hard for people to get jobs now. Business has become the way to live. Even if it's not something that you want to do, going forward, but for you to sustain yourself now, it's you have to actually have something that you can create, something very small that you can use to be able to take care of your family or whatever. So whether you want to be a multimillionaire going forward, or you using business just to be able to sustain your family, I try to empower women on that, our economy is in shambles, and now we have to come forward with the ideas that you have, whatever idea you have, small or big. Take it, use it to empower yourself, and use it to take care of your families. And, helping women to realize that about themselves has been a bit challenging, because, women feel like they have to be apologetic about the people that they are, or the power that they have within them.
Yes, and Shereen, just your comment as well, having been for well over 20 years in the corporate world, and I'm sure you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot as far as empowerment is concerned. And I know close to your heart is also the whole question about empowerment, and looking at some of the lessons, the life lessons that you've learned, being empowered and being in a position that you are at this point in time, but at the same time, taking this to other women who need to be, who need to be empowered.
Absolutely. I mean, I must balance it out a little bit, Aniette, and say that the empowerment that I've had in corporate space has come from good men. We have some amazing men in the business world and in the world of sports who really do reach out their hand and to help you up. I mean, I had 15 years of amazing mentorship, my first mentorship with a gentleman by the name of Robbie Berg, and he taught me amazing and wonderful things in business. So I think, you can't talk about empowerment without talking about good men that help women to make their way into those circles. But certainly the thing that makes me passionate as I get older is I have a beautiful daughter who I often look at, and, the future belongs to young women like her. And it's the responsibility of this generation, of women in this generation, mothers now, to be able to trailblaze, to change policies, to change cultures, and to do our part so that our daughters don't have to endure
Mhm.
sometimes the abuse or the bias that we've had to endure, making, the traction that we've made in a commercial space or in a sports space or whichever space you find yourself in. I think we have a responsibility as women to join hands with each other, but also join hands with good men who welcome us into those environments so that the next generation is better.
Yes, very interesting. You speak about generation and the generational gap, because if I look at my granny's time, my mom's time, and look at the time when I had basically grown up, and looking at my daughters, for instance, and one can actually see the difference, Shereen, and clearly it does require a different mindset, but also a different approach, especially in these times.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about collaboration. We can't talk about the empowerment or the inclusion of any group that has been marginalized or oppressed in any way without talking about collaboration. And so, in as much as what I love to celebrate women and I love to talk about the empowerment of women, I'm very passionate about collaboration and in partnership and in working together. Because I think if we focus too much about the empowerment of women, we draw a dividing line between women and men, when really I believe the glue that holds it together is that unity, that relationship, that working together. More and more as we go from one generation into the next, with an increased tolerance and increased respect for one another. I don't think the way forward is drawing a divide between the two genders. I made a comment on social media today that I can't wait for the day where we don't have to celebrate Women's Day and we could just all be treated the same way, fairly, because there's a lot of amazing men out there doing wonderful work, and we don't have a special day for men who are doing that. So the fact that we're celebrating women still points to the fact that there's an injustice, there's a gap that needs to be filled. I think what we need to work towards is everybody, being included, everybody getting the same opportunities, so that we don't have to have these national days that point out, historical injustices. I'm far more passionate about the future than what I am about the past.
Well, certainly. And I think we're also, when we're looking at women, Poppy, and when Shereen speaks about collaboration, when one looks at both men and women, they need to be complementing each other rather than competing or working against each other.
Yes.
And we know, looking at even from an Islamic perspective as well, the Quran is very, very clear, where the Quran speaks about men and women being garments unto each other, because that's basically what they are, and complementing, working together. And this is where, sometimes there seems to be a misunderstanding as far as women are concerned. We know you mentioned earlier on, you spoke about women being a lot more emotional, but that is the nature of a woman. I mean, a man can't give birth. Now, what I'm saying is these are issues that people need to understand. But again, when it comes to development and developing a person, whether it's men or women, and this is where I say is, this is where we need to work together, the collaboration that Shereen speaks of, so that, we can both, in fact, it's to the benefit of both the male and the female to actually grow in collaboration.
Yeah. And, when we're talking about collaboration, I've had, some guys who are in the renovating space, like home renovations, who have come to me and say, you know what, you're a female-led business, and we feel like, if we were to work with you, would receive more clients, because, women are now in the forefront, if you can look at it. So if you're a woman and you're owning a business, and when you start looking for funding, there's a chance that you being female, you have a greater chance of receiving that funding. So there are men who are out there like, you know what, I need to collaborate with a woman to be able to, to push business. So I've had men who have approached me and said, you know what, we see that you run a business and it's doing great. We would like to work with you. And if we have that kind of mindset between men and women, because there are certain things that I lack in, that I need men to be able to come into the business and fulfill. And there are certain aspects that I am able to bring into the business of which men cannot bring into the business. So if we can get together and work together, we would be able to create businesses that can last for generations and generations, instead of men looking at us and seeing the weaker counterpart, or us looking at men and seeing they want to dominate, they want to take over, and all of that. So if we can all to come together, and put our strengths and our weaknesses together, we would be able to actually create something that is really big.
Yes, and Shereen, just looking at some of the other important issues that we need to unpack, and right at the outset, I spoke about certain issues, particularly looking at matters of priority. For instance, talking about feminization of poverty, and generally, when one looks at not only South Africa, we can go right across the African continent, we can go right across the entire world, where it appears, and it is the case where women have had to bear the brunt of a lot. I spoke about globally, we've got the question of refugees or the problem of refugees. And when one looks at the majority of refugees right across the entire world, it's women. Who is suffering at the end of the day? It's a women. And also, when one looks at it closer to home, looking at the country, looking at the number of women that are breadwinners, that need to take care of children, they need to take care of their grandchildren, grandmothers. And we see this happening over and over again. And this is something that comes up every year without fail. Feminization of poverty, we need to eradicate, we need to eliminate. But for some reason or the other, we are not progressing, I would say, even by 1 foot, for instance.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult because I think women are largely still the caregivers of the home and also of the children. And at the end of the day, there's only 24 hours in a day. So for someone who has to care for their home, has to care for maybe 2 or 3 children, plus keep down a full-time job, it's not easy. There is some truth to the point that men make to say that women might not be able to work the same hours. You do have to juggle. I have worked exceptionally hard as a single parent now in the last 2 years to keep my business, to be able to give me the flexibility as a mother, because my daughter is really my first priority. So I'm in a very fortunate position where I get to, manage my own hours. But for the average woman who's employed by somebody who is really tied down to that 8 to 5 job, it is exceptionally difficult to grow and be promoted when you can't work later because you do have to fetch your children from school, or you may need to relieve your helper at home. I think, a lot can be done from home. And I think what has helped us a lot is the flexibility that's come in now with virtual workspace and more people being allowed to work from home. But the struggle continues. I just think about the women in this country who don't have access to their own transport, still heavily dependent on public transport. It's not easy. It's not easy leaving your small children at home. The guilt that you deal with as a working parent is certainly not easy. And the sacrifices, the tug of war between, trying to make things work financially and looking after your children. And there's a lot of men that are unemployed. So not even just single mothers, married couples where possibly dad has lost his job. So, that would be the breadwinner earning the higher salary. Mom now needs to make ends meet. Yeah, the challenges are massive. The challenges are massive. And that's why, the cry of my heart, and wherever I go, as far as I go, I talk about collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. There's just no way out of this mess except that we work together, men and women.
Well, exactly. And Poppy, talking about family responsibilities outside of work, and that alone is an added responsibility. And also the whole question surrounding the motherhood penalty. And we know that sacrifices that women have to make becoming mothers, but at the same time, especially when they're ambitious, they want to embark on a career. We find many instances their careers being delayed as well as a result of motherhood. And that's the reason why we actually call it a motherhood penalty.
Yeah. Yeah. Alhamdulillah, being a businesswoman, I've been able to actually schedule my time around my son, him going to school and when he comes back. So I always have to make sure that I'm home by 3 p.m. But then in instances where I have to attend a meeting or I have to, because this past weekend I was exhibiting at Decor at the Sandton Convention Center. So the exhibition was running from like 8 in the morning until the evenings, late in the evenings. And it was very difficult for me because I had to find somebody to be able to help me, that when my son comes back, I had to ask my neighbors that when my son comes back, can you just at least be able to accommodate him until I come back home. And for me it was because when you're a parent, when your child is not with you, you are not settled. You're always wondering, is he okay? Are the neighbors okay with me always dropping my son by them when I can't make it home in time. So we actually face quite a challenge when it comes to family responsibility, and also trying to manage our careers or manage our businesses. I remember when I was pregnant with my son, I used to work for a news network. I had to quit after, I think my son was like 3 months old, because I went through a very tough time, with postpartum depression, and leaving my son at home, and I'm at work and I'm miserable, and I'm questioning myself, is my son okay? He's still young, what am I doing here? It went to a point where I had to resign from work because I was very uncomfortable with being at work, knowing that my son is still young, and I feel like I still needed some time to take care of him, and those such things that women go through, that you have to be a mother, and at the same time you have to push this career, push this business, and it's very difficult because now you're leaving your kids behind, and all of that. And your bosses don't even understand, they don't buy that. You have to come to work and keep up your work and your career and push whatever, but then your kids are at home. And yeah, those are some of the things that we go through as women, that you have to leave your kids at home and focus on your career, but then you're being a mother and being this emotional being and being this primary caregiver. It's not always easy, because when you're at work, you're always stressing about your kids. You're always thinking, are they okay? Are the people that I left them with responsible enough to take care of my kids? So it's really challenging for us as parents, and also wanting to be giants in our industries.
Well, thank you for that, Poppy. I see Dr. Quraysha Sooliman has joined us now, project manager at the Center for Mediation in Africa at the University of Pretoria. Dr. Quraysha, if you could unmute your mic. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
It is unmuted. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you. Hi to the panelists as well, Poppy and Shereen.
Well, we're going to throw you straight into the deep end, Quraysha, and we've been talking with Shereen and Poppy. We've covered quite a bit of ground, looking at August, not traditionally known as Women's Month, and we know we're looking ahead at Women's Day as well. And the point that was made right at the beginning is, why confine 1 month when all the focus is on women, where we should be obviously addressing a lot of the issues that we have been talking about, and we will still be addressing a number of issues with you, when we should be looking at these things all the time on a day-to-day basis, because these are challenges. There are a number of issues that are facing women right across the board, many aspects that we need to tackle, we need to unpack, we need to talk about, but more importantly, we need to do something about. So just an overview from your side, as you've joined us, Quraysha.
Okay, so thank you for that, Inayat. And yes, I would agree with what my fellow panelists have said. Actually, my sisters have said today about that. I would like to take it one step further, however. I feel that it's rather problematic that we're still talking about Women's Day and we're categorizing it as woman. Why is there still this difference between man and woman? The whole focus needs to change, because the minute we start compartmentalizing, when you start creating binaries, man, woman, black, white, etc., you're actually performing much of the rituals that have been created through coloniality and colonialism. This is how you bring about distinction, you create discrimination, etc. We need to break those barriers down. We need to start looking at it from a human perspective. It's one human to another. So why are we still having a Women's Day when we should be focusing, and this should be the norm, by the way. I'm struggling to understand that why in 2022 we're still raising issues that affect women. And as I personally feel that a society that has not recognized the fact that a woman is a human, and that we should look at the woman from a human perspective as one, and look at men from a human perspective as well. If such a society or such a nation or even the global world cannot understand this, then certainly we are far more backward than we care to recognize. And there certainly is a problem in terms of our intellect, because we claim to be, Western civilization claims to be very advanced, to be very progressive, but you still have these discriminatory, trajectories that trail women, that trail Black women, especially that trail Muslim women. The discriminations that come upon people of different races, etc. It certainly shows that we are in a very problematic frame in which we understand ourselves, and I think we're hypocritical because our inner eye has been inverted. We think we are great, we think we are progressive, we think we are making strides. In actual fact, we're not. The reality about women and a woman's space should be the norm. A woman should be recognized, she should be respected. And at this stage, in this century, at this time, it shouldn't be that we still need to say Women's Day and listen, women need to fight for gender rights, for better salaries, etc. That the fact that this is still happening, it means that we do not see women as humans on an equal level. Firstly, and secondly, it means that our entire understanding of ourselves as a progressive society is a fallacy.
Well, certainly, and I think, there's just so much you've said, actually. And Shereen, just looking at the question that Dr. Quraysha has raised in terms of why has society not recognized women?
Yeah, and look, I don't think we can go as far as to say society has not recognized women, but I think what Dr. Sooliman has said is actually just echoed what we spoke about earlier on in the conversation, that why are we still having Women's Day? I think I said that earlier. Why are we still drawing this line between men and women? There are amazing women and there are amazing men, and surely we get to the point, and that's where we need to go, where everybody is treated the same way. I always write on my social media, good morning, humans, sleep well, humans, have a wonderful weekend, humans, to try and take that dividing line away, because I think we're all pre-programmed with a level of bias, and we have to raise our consciousness so that we start to talk about a humanity rather than a gender bias. It creeps in so subtly, whether it's through social humor, whether it's through the labels that we give each other. I have to check myself and correct myself very often, even as a woman, in the way that I write and the way that I think, and keep tapping myself on the shoulder to remind myself, in as much as that there are good women doing great work out there, there are great men that are doing wonderful work out there. And again, coming back to the point of collaboration, working together, treating each other with dignity and respect, and unlearning some terrible programming that's carried from one generation into the next, unfortunately. But it takes a higher level of consciousness, for sure.
Well, it certainly does, but also the fact that why we are pre-programmed, and Poppy, just talking to you about it in terms of, when we're saying why are we pre-programmed, we need to understand the role of a society in this programming process, for want of a better term. But also when one looks at it generally, when one looks at media, for instance, and also looking at social media as well, and possibly even looking at the powers that be. And we know that with the problems, for instance, for example, the country had faced with regards to gender violence, gender abuse, we had to actually set up a special ministry to actually deal with those issues. We had to come up with policies. We had to come up with legislation. Now, all of this is part and parcel of the pre-programming.
Like I said, and Shereen has also spoken about it, that we are celebrating this day, and I spoke about it that women mostly we only get this recognition during this month, and I don't understand where it comes from. And again, if you're going to look at the calendar, go into your social media platforms, as of Monday until the 30th of August or the 31st of August, it's all these events that are actually focused on women. Why is it that we are only celebrated in this month, and then after that it's like nothing is happening? I don't even, when it's the month of August, I don't even have to approach media companies to say, okay, fine, this is who I am. They come to me, but after that we have to struggle. And with all this pre-programming, I don't know how it came about, but then we need to lose the narrative, to say that women are the weaker beings and men are or whatever. Like we said, collaborating, to come together, and put our weaknesses and our strengths on the table, we could actually come together and build something that is very solid, together, and not looking at, women are the weaker beings or men are the stronger ones. Yes, they can be the stronger ones. Yes, we can be the weaker ones. But then bringing together our weaknesses and our strengths, we can be able to build something that is very solid and something that actually can take us forth as human beings. Because now we are faced with this entire thing of gender-based violence, and I think it's just men who think that they are stronger than women and wanting to take advantage of the weaker side or the emotional side of women, which I know, I honestly don't even think that it makes sense. Yes, it's a gender-based violence, but then looking at it also, I read somewhere, I think it was a few months ago, that it's called gender-based violence and not women-based violence, and we always have to look at it on both sides. Like Shereen said, we have to work together, and you don't have to look at women as the weaker side of the human race. We are all humans, and we all have weaknesses and we all have strengths. This pre-programming that we got growing up, to say that women are weaker or women belong in the kitchen or whatever, that narrative is changing, and women are coming forth to say that, we also have strengths and we want to showcase them to the world. And having men that don't want to accept that, it's have actually problematic, that you do have men that look at women like, no, you can't do this, and we have strength, and women, also men have their own weaknesses that women are able to fulfill. If we are able to find a balance, or strike a balance between the two beings or the two genders, then we are set for higher purpose.
Yes, and Quraysha, I would actually question the fact, and Poppy mentioned celebrating. Now, celebrating means to be happy. And what are we actually celebrating when we're talking about our problems, and problems that are recurring, problems that are coming over and over again? I mean, for how long have we been talking about gender inequality? How long have we been talking about gender bias, about feminization of poverty, all the problems that women are actually faced with, violence against women, xenophobic attacks, mainly against women as well. So, I mean, do we really call it a celebration? If you could unmute, please, Quraysha.
Absolutely not, Inait. You're 100% correct. And we need to recognize the terminology. And Shereen has said, like she said, I'm constantly checking my what I'm tweeting, the words that I'm using, and how we use words is very, very important. It certainly is not an occasion for celebration, because when we celebrate, then we're doing what, we've done in this transition from apartheid to the so-called democratic transition. It is that we memorialize. So we're focusing more on memorials and commemorations, etc., rather than looking at the substance. And when the minute you start creating memorials, you start creating statues, you start creating plaques, etc., it is as if to say that we have transcended, we have overcome. And if we're going to keep allowing this to happen, then we're going to never achieve that substantive discussion that we need. But more specifically, like everybody on the panel is saying right now, we should be beyond the substantive discussion by right now. It should be more of a reality that is happening, that it is recognized that a woman is human, and that she has that there is gender justice. From an Islamic perspective, we don't speak about gender equality, but we speak about gender justice, and I still support that particular view. All of this, even part of giving a day, Women's Day, it's part of tokenism. And this representation of women seems to become a form of tokenism. The same way in which women are often hired, placed, or tolerated in organizations or public offices, simply strictly to prove that those places are not discriminatory. So holding the so-called Women's Month or Women's Day, etc., is to say, hey, we're not discriminatory, we recognize you, women are important, etc. But all of this, the language, is important to unpack. It is all hypocritical. In the same breath that you will find, and this is very prominent amongst the Muslim community as well, you will hear that they will say that, the woman is the homemaker. And then we find that women are forced into labor-intensive work. And often we hear that women, often, and this is amongst us, especially our communities, where we are told that women are the first educators of a nation. But if you really look at it, you find boys' clubs, in higher institutions, in the ulama councils, in the mosques, in the madrasas, business, corporate management, politics, etc. And so women, although they claim that women are the first educators, meaning that the intellect and the role that the woman has to play is very, very important. But suddenly, the minute she's reared her child, that it seems to not occur to them, but it's the message that is passed on is that role of the woman, or that intellect of a woman, or that that contribution of a woman just fades away, and it all becomes the priority and the benefit of the men. And that's why we find all of these boys clubs. So yes, we move away, and we have to be very careful about the language. It's not a celebration. It certainly is not a memorial, and it's not a commemoration either. We have to recognize that we don't actually, I think women should just say, we don't want this. We don't want one day, or we don't want 1 month. We want to say that every day is Women's Day, but I'm wrong there. Then let me rephrase that. Every day is Human Day. So, like Shereen has said, they are great men and they are great women, and we need to recognize everyone's contributions. And I just want to add one last thing. I also had a tremendous problem with that, hashtag that went out which said men are trash. Do you remember that? And I felt that was problematic. That was really problematic because, I am raised in a family of powerful, amazing, loving, contributing, supportive men. And I feel my husband, my children, my son, my father, my brothers. So to come up with that, I simply disagree with that, because that is, again, generalizing. When you say men are trash, you're saying all men are trash. When you speak about, women in a derogatory way, you're saying all women are like that. In the same way as you're saying all Muslims are terrorists. Be careful about the language, and don't just jump onto any bandwagon now because of the behavior of a few or the actions of a few.
Yes, and Quraysha, just I'd like to add one more phrase, and I'm sure this is a very, very common one. You've grown up with it. I've grown up with it as well, where we talk about the first school or the first madrasa is in the lap of the mother. And now that is a very, very, common saying. But again, when I spoke to Shereen and Poppy, obviously both of them come from the corporate, from the business world. But just looking at it from an intellectual perspective, because, you are at the University of Pretoria, you are an intellectual as well. And also sometimes just looking at, casting, I would say, doubt on the ability or the intellectual capacity of a woman. And I think that is something that we need to talk about as well when we talk about gender bias.
Yeah, but there's another factor that you're not even looking at it. It's already that particular phrase is already wrapping a woman into a particular role. That to say that it's your job to raise the kids. And that already is discriminated, because it's not her job alone to raise the kids. Husband and wife, mother and father play an equal role in the upbringing of the child. So yes, the mother contributes because she spends more time with the children, but it's not limited to the mother alone. So when we ingrain even that, it's so subtle, exactly as Shereen has said. The language is so subtle. It creates particular stereotypes for you, that you stay at home, you raise the kids, you look after them. And there's nothing wrong with staying at home. With COVID, I myself have become very comfortable at being at home. I'm enjoying being more at home now. And the thought of going to university actually is frustrating. Sometimes it actually scares me. I feel like I really don't want to go. I don't want to go onto the road and face all that anger, that road rage, all of those negative sentiments that are out in the world there. I'm so safe and comfortable in my home, but I can still contribute. So it is a choice that every person should make. Even a man should have that right to make a choice, whether he wants to stay at home and work from home or he wants to go out. But of course, there are responsibilities that need to be met. And it shouldn't be that he says, I'm staying at home and you go out and work, things like that. We know that Islamically, there are certain rights that the wife has, which needs to be provided for through the man. And of course, and if there's difficulty, then they both contribute towards the home. So in ITS, it does affect so that's the one part. The second part is about the intellectual capacity and ability of a woman. Sadly, I know what you were raising there, and I'm sure that the audience who's watching this is also familiar with what we're raising, and that again goes to the negation of a woman, of her contribution, of her intellect, and it's always about suppressing the woman. So in many ways, you try and it's that double speak. I'm raising you, I'm telling you, and I remember many years ago when I wrote that book, Proudly Muslim, what motivated me was exactly this. It was this conversation. It was a Women's Day. And one of the shuyukh came on from one of the channels that is very popular amongst the Muslims, and he came on and he praised, the female sahabiyat, and he spoke about the Muslim woman and all their rights and the rights that Islam has given. And as I was sitting and listening to him, I said, oh my God, you're so hypocritical. You're speaking about a past and about our religion that has given women so many rights, but you and people like you and very many organizations amongst us, the Muslims, actually do the opposite. So you speak with one tongue, but your actions is something else. And we need to overcome that in the Muslim community as well. Recognize that women are part of the human species. If she can go and do jihad like the Prophet ﷺ, etc., let her do it. If she wants to stay at home, let her do it. If she wants to go to university and she wants to study, let her do it. If she wants to be in the corporate, let her do it. It's her choice. Every person should recognize what is their responsibility. They should know their limitations. They should understand their capacity, their potential, their capability. And ultimately, every person makes a choice about their life, because life is about purposefulness and about benefit. How do I, incorporate my being into a sense of purposefulness, and how do I benefit? And that is where we should be. And that is how we should understand every single person's responsibility and let them make choices. But please stop, praising women on the one hand, and then on the other hand, apply your patriarchal mentality that forces women down and tells them that, okay, you're great, you're intellectual, etc., but you need to sit put. You cannot contribute.
Yes. Shereen, just looking at society and following up from what Quraysha has been saying, and looking at society at large, whether we look at a social level or a socio-economic level, do you think society is doing enough? Do you think society really cares on the issues that we are speaking about?
Definitely. I don't think we would see the change over time if there was a complete indifference towards what is happening in our community. And I think as the environment changes, we are changing and evolving with that environment. It would be impossible and completely unrealistic to say people don't care at all. I think when it affects you, you care. There are a lot of women who are being affected, and they do care, and they are trying, each one in our own way, to make a difference. And there are a lot of good men who also care, who are opening up industries and sectors, and roles are now more than ever, after a huge global crisis, a lot of roles have been reversed. We've seen so many fatalities, one or the other of the parent passing away, male or female, either mom or dad losing their job. I think, we really are in a space of collaboration more than ever, actually. I would say post COVID-19 global crisis, I'm seeing people work together a lot more. Personally, I think there are a far greater sense of community. I think the one thing we have to be careful of, though, is the fear that comes into people, and there's also a lot more competitiveness. It's almost a lack mentality. A gentleman described it so nicely for me a few years ago. He said, we need to make the cake bigger so we all can eat from it. There's not less cake, and we don't have to cut up more slices. And that's my vision for the future, is that we would all work together to make a bigger cake that we can all eat from, a bigger bowl to share, rather than approach business or approach society with the mentality of the more people are involved, the less is in it for me. Because that is really, unfortunately, there is that insecurity sometimes and uncertainty about the future. And so I'm seeing both sides rise up. But I think by and large, there is a greater sense of community following a crisis, and a coming together of people that are working together. It is unfortunate sometimes that those small little pockets of people who are very competitive or very insecure can spoil, the overall atmosphere. But I think, for the most part, what I see is people actually coming together and working together for the greater good.
Yes, and Poppy, just looking at women and leadership, because sometimes we find that male counterparts are actually threatened by women in leadership positions, and just looking at obviously your experience, you are the head of your company, but also when one looks at men in general, and trying to prove a point. And we see this point scoring exercise taking place over and over again, whether we look at it at a corporate level. We see it at various levels. We see it in society, we see it in the home, and as both of you alluded to, the dynamics have changed, where we find that women in many households are now the breadwinners, and or they're earning more than their spouses. Now, all of this, at the end of the day, would when one looks at leadership, for instance, credibility. I think this is the word that I was actually looking for, where male leaders see that, what, I'm basically losing now. I'm losing my credibility. I'm not the power that I am. I am not the leader that I should be. And again, it's some sort of a stigma that some men see, and they take it very, very seriously. And this possibly could lead to some of the problems that we have been talking about when we talk about gender violence, gender abuse. And it happens. It's reality. It is happening. It's happening on a day-to-day basis.
Aniat, where I am based right now, I find that there are a lot of households that they don't have um, males or fathers. And it's really sad, to look to see that, a lot of women, which has been made to be like a norm, where you find that the men are not present in the women's life or in their children's life. And you find that women are now left or stuck raising kids all alone. Now, it's sad to see, because when I was back in high school, there used to be this program that was run by some network. It was called Take a Girl Child to Work Day, and which I find now, growing up and being a mother to a boy, that it was very unfair. You know, we are teaching women to be these leaders, and we have forgotten that we also need to groom these boys or these men. Because now these people have to coexist. Men and women now have to coexist. But then now, when you are sidelining the boys and only wanting to groom girls or wanting to groom women and forgetting totally about the men, who is now left to be the leader in the society? And now men feel like they're being stripped of their power, that, women are now taking over. And, it will create a lot of frustration amongst men, that, women are taking over. We do not have a space or a place in this world anymore, and which is very sad, because I'm a mother to a boy, and the system now, it's kind of like working against boys, that you go to school, you find empowering programs that only empower women and don't empower men. We have forgotten to groom the boy child, and now we are only focusing on grooming women, and we have forgotten on teaching our men on how to lead, on how to be leaders in societies and communities in their homes. And now we're giving women all this power and forgetting that, the boy child also needs grooming. And, also, celebrating women now, what we're talking about, that it's very unfair that we have this day that is dedicated to celebrating women. What about the men? What about our boys? What about, them being able to take a piece of the power, the piece of the cake, as Shereen has said? So, we are here teaching women on how to be leaders, but we're forgetting about the boy child. It's like we have sidelined men. The world is already tough on them, because when you're a boy, there's this pressure that you have to be the leader, you have to be the provider of your family, the protector of your family. But then when society is stripping that away from you, you can't provide, you can't protect. Because, when a man cannot provide, they feel useless. And now you're taking that away from men, and you're giving all the power to women. Men all of a sudden feel useless, that we can't lead, we can't do anything, because all the power has been taken away from us and it has been given to women. Why don't we have this equal share, where, yes, we teach the woman the girl child or the woman to lead, but also don't forget that there's also a boy, which, society is really sidelining the boys. You go to school, there's all these programs. Take a girl child to work day. You have Women's Month, where it's events based on women or whatever, and you go into these government funding where they tell it's only women funding. What about the boy? What about the boy child?
Yes. Quraysha, I've just got a message here, and talking about bringing in a discussion on the rape culture that is prevalent in our South African society. And we know with violence, and we know there's been brutal violence. We've seen it over and over again. And even if you go to the SAPS, you go to the police station, now you would find a special desk where you can report gender-based violence. But what this message is saying is, and I haven't seen this clip, I'll be honest, it says that there is a clip doing the rounds at ENCA interview where Minister Becky Cele is saying a lady was lucky to have been raped by one guy. Other ladies were raped by up to 10 men.
That, and I was like, oh my God, and this guy is our, the police minister, and why do we still have people like this leading us? And that's already the problems, and let me come back to contextualize this, and I'm going to start from what Poppy was saying. And Poppy is absolutely 100% correct. And it comes back to the very first statement which I made about us compartmentalizing. So when we take a girl child to work, we're compartmentalizing. It's not take children to work or take a responsible child to work, etc. And that's where you see that we have this gender-based violence. We have this kind of attitude towards women in South African society. And a colleague of mine, he actually, I remember he was doing a paper and he said, Quraysha, I was trying to understand this because he's a feminist scholar. And he said, I was trying to understand all of these issues, but it occurred to me that in South Africa, men, the majority of men, do not have a good role model. Most of the homes in which children have been raised, you find that the man has been taken out of that setting. Either if you look at during the apartheid and colonial times, so if from the time of slavery, later on in terms of apartheid, where they were forced into labor, going into the towns, the women were left in the rural areas to take care of the family, to rear the children. Then you had in the mining, you had the different hostels where men would go into hostels. And so children have been raised for generation upon generation upon generation in African countries without any good role models. And as a result, firstly, they're emasculated. Secondly, they suffer with a mental deficit in terms of emotional representation and in terms of appreciating how it is that a male parent works with his child or works with a woman or contributes in terms of building a cohesive society. They just don't know that. They don't know how to show emotion because they've been constantly told you cannot show emotion. And as a result, we have all of these issues which affects the psyche of the men. And that's why gender-based violence is such an issue in South Africa. And it will continue to exacerbate because now we have the modern urban family or we have the modern capitalist family. Still, it's a one-parent family. It's a nuclear family where there's only one parent present. And so children are not feeling, like I said, that responsibility of both the mother and the child. It's not only the mother who should raise the child, but the mother and the father take responsibility for the child. That is missing. And then we have people in public spaces. And that's why I'm saying there's a dearth of role models, like our police minister, who comes out and says that when some women are raped, it's not raped 10 times, but they're raped by 10 men. And this 19-year-old, if she can, he did kind of corrected. We said if you can call it lucky, but she was raped by one man. But still, just a comment like that to say, okay, you were only raped once, not say 2 times or 3 times or whatever, as if to make light of it. If you look at the entire affair around Jacob Zuma, that whole entire scenario around Kwesi and Jacob Zuma, it was really, it was throwing light on the kind of leadership that we have in this country, the kind of role models that young people are exposed to. And then we sit back and we ask, why is nothing changing? What is happening? And so the hard work comes from civil society, from people who have a consciousness, who have an ethical standing, who have a morality, who understand and appreciate humans for who they are. And we have to do the work. But whilst we're doing the work, and that's what frustrates me, and sometimes recently I think I've really been getting angry because you go out in the streets and you see all of these realities hitting you, and you see the poor people, you see children on the street, every corner there's somebody begging, people are hungry, and you get frustrated and you said, you know what, the government takes so much of my taxes, provides no services. At the end of the day, I'm fending for myself. I basically privatized my entire life because the state is not fulfilling its responsibilities. And then on top of that, when I go out, I'm faced with the harsh reality of this life, and I have to make a choice there again, but I have to help. I know I have to give food. If there's a person begging, I must give him. What if he really, really doesn't have something to eat? Can I just turn a blind eye? And so you get as if the state has put all the responsibility on us. And all of these people, these boys' clubs that I spoke about earlier, they don't recognize the harm that they are doing. The biggest, injustice that we can face is to continue compartmentalizing this, even in terms of men. We think that they're only unjust towards women, but men and men have competitions in the corporate world as well. It's a dogfight amongst them as well, but we don't speak much about that. And it all comes down to the system, and that system is a capitalist system which is exploitative. It has nothing of social justice, social cohesion, social harmony, and collaboration that Shereen is talking about. A system that is focused only on profit and not on people can never bring anything good.
Yeah.
Yes. What we're going to do now is the clip that we have been talking about the Minister of Police. We're going to play that out. And for those of us like myself, for instance, who haven't seen it, we just want to play it out quickly. And then Shereen will get to you for comment.
Rape them, and they order the rest to watch as the others are raped. One woman was raped by 10 men, not 10 times. By 10 different men, the other one by 8, the other one by 6, the other one by 4, 3, and all the one 19-year-old was lucky, if it is lucky, that was raped by one man.
Yes, that was our Minister of Police, Becky Kele, on the comment. And Shereen, in fact, as Quraysha was talking, I was actually looking at the screen. I was looking at your body language as well. You were grimacing at one point in time. And if you'd just like to comment on this video clip, but also generally just looking at violence and when we talk about rape culture as well, which is sadly, it's a huge problem. It's a massive problem in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely heartbreaking to be raped one time, let alone that should be counted lucky. I don't think he did it on purpose, but I think it was very insensitive. And one only has to consider if it were to happen to your mother or your wife or your sister. Once is enough, and it changes a man or a woman's life forever, because statistically, boy children are raped almost as much as girl children, but it's very much swept under the carpet and taboo to talk about socially. So at the end of the day, for me, rape is rape, whether it's a young boy child or a young girl child or a man or a woman. I mean, it's absolutely a horrific crime that changes somebody's life forever. I don't think it should be taken lightly. It is unfortunate in the society in which we live that it happens so often now that actually people barely flinch when they hear about it. We can read in the paper about somebody being raped or shot or murdered, and you kind of turn the page and go on to the rest of the news. Crime, because it is so rife, is hardly show-stopping, groundbreaking news anymore. If you watch the news today, it's much bigger crimes of war, its collective impact, and what's happening to people at an individual level sometimes get completely lost. So yeah, it sends shivers down my spine when we can get to a point as a society that we can actually say, well, she was only raped by one man, it wasn't that bad. It's shocking. It's shocking. It's shocking. I would like to believe that he didn't mean it that way, but it was the wrong thing to say.
Well,
I would just like to step in here 1 minute tonight, and now I'm speaking from a spiritual perspective, and I hope you can understand me that they usually say that the tongue is the gateway of the heart. So what the heart really carries within it usually materializes in terms of what comes out from the tongue. So we need to think about all of these things, because if anything, our society has lost its spirit, it's lost its spirituality, it's lost its ethics, its ethical nurturings, it has lost its morality, and that's why you get these slips of the tongue. But these slips of the tongue, there is no coincidence to it, and there is no mistake to it. It carries something that is within the soul already. And I would like to look at it from that. And as much as Shereen, I know you sound like you're trying to break the middle ground, and we're giving the benefit of the doubt. And yes, I will also break the middle ground. I'm from mediation. We have to give the benefit of the doubt, but we need to recognize that there is something here which we need to look at society in terms of a different lens, so that we can get a better understanding of what is actually happening.
Yes. And Poppy, also, I think just from what both Quraysha and Shereen have mentioned, is we need to do a lot of soul searching. We need to do a lot of introspection as to where we are as a society in terms of how we deal with the situation. This was just one of the few cases that we know of, and we know that this is rampant right across the entire country, particularly in rural areas where it is largely hidden, and also in certain societies, certain communities where there is a stigma attached to these things, so they are not being spoken about, not being, not being even reported sometimes as well. So what I'm saying is, as a society, we need to now look within ourselves. How do we deal with the situation? How do we tackle, particularly when we have crimes like these of a violent nature?
Firstly, I would like to add that, rape is rape. It's one person or 10 people who raped you, it's still rape. It doesn't make it any better just because the Picky Planet says you were lucky that you were raped by one person. It's still rape, it doesn't make it any less. We need to, as a society, come together to work, trying to fix what is going on into our boys' heads and into our girls' heads, and try to, come together, because what happened to these young women was so unfair, and it was wrong, because I saw a clip before a Biggie Kwele came in. There was a clip where a woman was complaining about the area that there's no electricity. The street poles have been down for months and months and months, and they've been complaining to the municipality to say that please fix our street lights. They've been down, and crime is really, very rife in that part of the area. And for our municipalities and our government to actually turn a blind eye to what's happening in our communities, this is what leads to criminals thinking that they can just have a heyday on women or whatever. And it always comes to the government. What are they doing? What are they putting forth to say that we are behind you? Instead of them wanting to always solve problems, or coming after the damage has been done, what are they doing now to protect communities? What are they doing now to educate our boys? What are they doing now to educate our girls? But then they always want to come after havoc has been done in communities, and they want to say that other people were lucky that they were raped by just one person. Where were you when people were complaining about the streetlights, that this place is very unsafe for young women, this place is very unsafe for young boys? What were you doing at that point? So if our government can start listening to the cries of communities, whether you are from a rural part of South Africa or a township or in the suburbs, the government, when the people in the community are complaining about a certain service delivery, you have to come down and try to fix whatever causes the problem. We have a problem with our government and our municipalities. They don't come down to listen to the people's cries, whether it's, service delivery or, crime. They always sit in their high positions and want to come there and say that people were lucky just because they were raped by one person, which I'm not, I don't, like Quraysha said, it cannot be a slip of the tongue, He has been thinking about this one was like, and then it kind of like slipped and came out. He was thinking about it, and what it was in his heart to say that one girl was lucky, and that's not luck. rape is rape, whether you were raped by one person or 10 people. It's still rape. It still has the same effect as that the other women who were raped by the 10 men. So, our government officials must just get off their high chairs and stop coming when the, havoc has already been done, to come and, try to solve things that I know they're not going to solve it. I know even past this incident, the street lights will not be fixed. And it's very sad that they want to come through and the media is there to come and say that other people were lucky. What are they doing before that happens? What were they doing? Were they trying to fix whatever the community was complaining about? Because I'm sure this was not the first time that happened there. Because, when you go to, TikTok or whatever, there are certain videos that talk about that place, that was not the first time that, such incidents had occurred in that very same place. So now, because it has caught the attention of the media, Peggy Kwene comes through and wants to talk about it. What were they doing before? Did they try to solve the problem, or were they just sitting in their lavish homes?
Yes, Quraysha, I noticed you mentioned social justice, or the lack of social justice, quite a few times during this discussion. And my question would be, where are we going wrong? Why is there a lack of social justice? Whether we're looking at it from a family perspective, looking at it at a community level, the country at large, we see it even within our education systems. We see it in our schools. We hear about schoolgirl pregnancies. All these things are occurring, and all of that, when one tries to obviously tie it down to social justice or the lack of social justice, clearly we've got a problem.
Certainly, and I've said it already, is the system that we're living in, it's a capitalist system, which is fundamentally exploitative. Capitalism is undergirded by another very problematic ideology, and that is a racist ideology. That racist ideology, and it's not only about black and white, because racism can be in terms of an Islamophobia. Islamophobia is racism. It's like looking down. It is where the power structures are held, who holds the power structures, and how you treat a particular group or a representation of people. So for as long as this continues, as long as we have these ideologies, these systems that undergird the international system, these are the dominant ideologies that are pervasive in every state, in every institution, in every organization. You're going to continuously have this, and you're going to have other problems. We're not going to solve the world's problems. Maybe we'll make a difference in our own communities. We start changing mindsets. I think perhaps, actually, in the past, when I was studying political science, we thought anarchist was bad. To be an anarchist was bad. But I am more inclined to think nowadays that, the way in which the world is, perhaps anarchism might be good, where people then take control of their own systems. We've seen it here in South Africa, where the court has actually given certain communities the right to run municipalities, because the municipalities have failed. And the citizens who are running the municipalities, fixing the water, fixing the electricity, the potholes, are doing a far better job. So the whole thing points down to this. It will only have social justice when the system which controls us, which dominates us, and which is very prevalent in every democracy in the world today, when that system changes. And when we as human beings start to recognize that we need to change how we view each other, woman to woman, man to woman, woman to man, etc. When we recognize this and we understand, and especially in terms of the hierarchy in which patriarchal mentality has created, that the honor of men need not be founded upon the degradation of women. When we start to change these mindsets, when we fight consistently against the exploitative systems, starting first with capitalism. And don't get confused. Capitalism is not a free market economy. People try to brainwash you with that. It's two different ideologies. A free market economy can exist, but not undergirded by an exploitive capitalist system. When we start changing these ideologies, move away from liberalism, etc., more towards social democracy, give people their rights, and politicians should recognize, they are just glorified public servants. Mr. Ambassador, His Excellency, what is all this nonsense? They're just glorified glorified public servants. They are there to serve. And they take those positions because they say we are here to serve the people. They need to recognize this. We need to bring more humility into our societies. We need to bring more spirituality into our societies, into our communities. And as women, and as men, mothers and fathers, we need to sit and constantly work with ourselves. First, we need to fix ourselves, because we're also very screwed up, because we've grown up in these systems with these ideologies, and we need to fix ourselves and our families. That's where we're going to start tonight. But in going out there to change the world, it's not going to happen. Let's start with ourselves within the small communities and the small, areas of influence that we have. And inshallah, who knows, perhaps the goodness that we can create or generate from this and the honor that we can bring will perhaps have a far-reaching effect, inshallah, and things will change.
Well, clearly, in fact, very, very profound indeed, Quraysha, and these obviously are the building blocks. And I suppose, Shereen, you will agree as well, where, Quraysha speaks with, starting with ourselves, looking at families, looking at our communities, and building from there. And that is the only way we're going to overcome some of these issues. Or otherwise, next year, August, we will be having the exact same discussion.
Hopefully not. And yet, hopefully not. I think it comes back to what I was saying about a higher consciousness and correcting yourself, and really approaching everything in that spirit of collaboration, so that we can work together and not repeat, the same injustices into the future. I think we need to keep our eye on the future. And I agree with Dr. Sooliman, not to memorialize what the progress that is already made. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Well, we're going to go. In fact, we've got about a few minutes to go. I'm going to go around the panelists, starting with you, Poppy, actually, and just some final thoughts before we end this broadcast.
To add on what Quraysha said, let's work on ourselves. Every time I look at my son, I ask myself, what kind of a person am I raising? Will he be an honorable man, a respectable man, a man who look at women and see an equal counterpart and not, a weak person or somebody he thinks he can own or boss around? Let's work on ourselves, because we also grew up in a very, some of us grew up in very unfortunate circumstances. Am I healing myself so that I can also be able to raise a healed boy, and not a person who'd grow up with trauma or want to objectify women, who see women as, a lesser being, So let's work on ourselves and our spirituality and, our emotions and our mental states, so that we are able to raise a better generation from what we were taught, or, the programming that we grew up with. We raise better children who will, lose the programming that we grew up with and learn to work as a collective, both men and women.
Shukran for that, Poppy. Quraysha?
I think I just want to raise one aspect, which I feel, I don't know if it was raised before, but I think a big stumbling block to women is women themselves. Women tend to put women down, and we need to move away from this mentality as well. We need to lift each other up, sister to sister, mother to mother. It's a woman to woman. We need to, because there is a mentality in the Muslim community as well. When you try and teach women about women's rights from an Islamic perspective, they say, no, but this is what we found. It's always been happening. This has been in our communities. As the Quran says, this, they answer when the Prophet used to speak to them, they would say, this is how we found our forefathers behaving. And we find that women themselves are not open to taking the advice, to actually learning what their religion is teaching them about their rights, and to understanding that there is a great hikmah, there's a great wisdom in the way in which these rights have been put forward to you. So a big problem to women attaining or achieving this position of gender justice is women themselves. And so that is one thing that we need to think about and focus on. And to end, I would just like to say that, people should understand that women are not there out for accolades. You always seem to think that they want to put a woman out there and parade her and then stick a trophy on her, put a little a medal on her and say, well done. That's not what we want. Women are simply saying, treat us as equal human beings. We have a right, we have an intellect. Allah has created us in the best of forms. We have the best contribution to make like any other human being, and we recognize the good contributions by others. Not only that, you must remember some of the best advice to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came from his wives, that the tradition of Islam and the legacy of the Prophet has been spread more by what his wives have narrated, which goes to show that women have a phenomenal contribution to make. And in this spirit, we need to recognize our own potential, our own achievement, and we need to establish for ourselves that understanding, that identity that moves away from always wanting to be in the limelight, wanting that accolade, wanting that recognition. Move away from that, but again, come to that basic understanding of my life has a purpose and I should be of benefit. How am I purposeful in terms of serving the greater humanity? Because from an Islamic point of view, from a spiritual point of view, the best of you is he who is best to mankind. So we're supposed to be in the service of other people, yes, and in the service of our own families. But at the same time, we should also be building ourselves up. You do not neglect yourself in the process of serving somebody else. You make yourself a full and a wholesome human being.
Well, certainly, Quraysha, just on a lighter note, talking about accolades and medals, if I had to give my wife a medal every time she cooked, I would have been bankrupt by today. Shereen, just last words from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, first of all, Aniat, for giving us a voice as a good man in media. Thank you for hosting all of us this evening. And to the men that are watching this broadcast tonight that are really doing a lot to help us break new ground and trailblaze, I say thank you. Thank you. To women, I say don't lose heart. I've been thinking a lot about it over the last few weeks. When you lose hope and you become hopeless, you stop trying. And I think there's a real danger in becoming discouraged as a woman and losing hope that things will change. Even if things change slowly in our generation, it reminds me of the tree where you plant the seed, but you might not sit in the shade. For the women that are in this generation that are doing the work, don't lose heart. Continue to push in and lean in, and we will change it for the next generation. We might not see the result of it in our lifetime, but I do believe in my heart of hearts that from one generation to the next, we will progress and go forward. But thank you very much for having us on your show. You've been amazing this evening.
Thank you very much for that, Shereen Hunter, Dr. Quraysha, Sooliman, and Poppy Kabini. We thank you. We say shukran to you as well. And we wish you all the best. Please take care. And let's hope we will be having a better discussion comes August 2023. Take care.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. Well, that brings us to the end of another broadcast, another edition of Wednesday Night with myself, Inayat Wadi. Once again, it's been wonderful being in the company of our viewers and also our listeners. We thank you for that. And until we meet again, for myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi